या पहले से और टफ होगी या और इजी होगी?
मुझे लगता है महाराष्ट्र, आप देख रहे हो महाराष्ट्र के ऊपर जो सरकार बिठाई है, एक इलीगल सरकार है, उसे दूर करना है। सबसे बड़ा चैलेंज वही है।
This is an India Today Network exclusive. I'm being joined by the recalled envoy of India to Canada, High Commissioner Sanjay Verma. After all the diplomatic spat that we've seen between India and Canada over the Khalistani matter, over Hardeep Singh Nijjar's killing, and India's strong position on where it stands when it comes to the investigations and the lack of evidence from Canadian side, Sanjay Verma is joining me to detail out what really happened in Canada, in Ottawa. Thank you so much for joining us here on the India Today Network, High Commissioner Verma. Let's begin with the first thing. The first and foremost is the investigations that are underway. Are there any details, any evidence that has been provided to India at all? Because it does seem like Canada seems to suggest that there is a lot of to and fro that happened between the two sides. But in terms of real evidence, was there anything that India really received from Canada?
Well, thank you very much for having me here. The first thing is that investigations are on, as all of us know, and a channel of communication had been open for a long time. But unfortunately, we have not seen any hard evidence which can be justifiable legally shared with us till today.
All right. There are some reports that say that some of the evidence fall in the realm of a violation of Vienna Convention, and is the reason why it's not in public domain. Has anything on that front been shared with you at all as to what they mean?
Not true. And me and my team, we were carrying out our normal diplomatic and consular duties as defined by the framework of the two conventions, the diplomatic and the consular conventions of Vienna. So we have not done anything to violate the Vienna Conventions. We have been doing our normal duty to see that the India's national interest is served, at the same time to see that our bilateral relations are promoted.
The other thing, there has been one-upmanship when it comes to Canada, and I'll talk about it, and we'd really like to know why is the Trudeau administration behaving in the manner in which they've behaved. It has not been diplomatic in any way, to say the least. But before that, there's a lot of confusion. A lot of people say the Indian side maintains you were recalled. Canadian side says you were declared persona non grata. What happened first?
So let me just run you through the chronology. It was Sunday, the 12th of October, that I was called to visit the Foreign Ministry, which is role as the Global Affairs Canada. We went there in the morning, and I was, after a brief conversation, I was handed over a note saying that I and my 5 colleagues are persons of interest. And the note requested that the Indian side waives off the diplomatic immunity of all of us. I, as the High Commissioner and a messenger between the two countries, I sent it back to Delhi. And the decision was obvious to me if I would have been in Delhi. Then the Delhi called the then Canadian acting High Commissioner in the Ministry of External Affairs and told him that the government of India has decided to withdraw all the 6 diplomats and officials who have been named as the persons of interest. That was reported back to Ottawa the next day through an email as an attachment to the email. My office received a notification from the Global Affairs Canada saying that all 6 of us have been declared persona non grata. So if you look at the chronology, we were withdrawn by the government of India. And only after that, as a reaction, I would believe, the Canadian government declared us persona non grata.
A lot of threats that your diplomats have faced in the recent past in Canada, and not just the headquarters, not just Ottawa, but also in our consulates in various parts of Canada. How did you tackle those threats? And, High Commissioner Verma, people can say what they want to, that they were not threats. Legally, it's not binding because there are fine print footnotes that are attached to those posters. But bullet written faces of you and your diplomats certainly scream a threat. How did you handle it? What's the kind of direct threat that you really faced?
See, there were continuous threats on us, and the Canadian government did provide us with some security, but the security was provided to me as the High Commissioner and our two Consul Generals in Toronto and Vancouver. But we had many more colleagues than just three of us. We had family members going out in the street and looking at the hooliganism and the threatening posture of the Khalistani extremists and terrorists. Anyone could have been harmed. So security was an issue, not only for the diplomats and officials, but also for their family members, they were easily identified. So as far as the threats are concerned, they continued coming in and day out. But I must also accept that the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, which is the federal policing agency in Canada, they did provide us with some security detail so that at least the three of us, the two Consul Generals and the High Commissioner in Ottawa, they have a protection detail with them, both when they are static, traveling, as well as when they are in the public events.
What's the kind of intimidation? We're saying, but what's the kind of intimidation? Were they carrying weapons? Were they directly coming in front of the diplomats and intimidating them? What really happened?
Most of the intimidation targeting us came through the social media by these two banned organizations through which the Khalistani extremists work. And some of them also came as emails during the so-called protests, which I call as hooliganism, when they gathered in front of the two consulates or the High Commission. They would shout slogans to intimidate us. Whenever we were going in public events, again, the slogan shouting in order to intimidate us. But, we were all prepared for this, and their intimidation tactics did not work. We were there to serve the Indian national interest, and we were bent upon serving them.
That's very important. Talking about national interests, now we are looking at a growing mobilization of the Khalistani movement in Canada, a real breeding ground. And in the recent times, with the Canadian administration being the manner in which they've been and handling the situation, do you think, High Commissioner Verma, that there is a certain space that the Pakistani elements have also gotten to mobilize Khalistani movement against India? How much of complicity do you see of Pakistani establishment here as well?
The way in which we have seen all over the world where the Khalistani terrorists and extremists do work with some of these Pakistani elements. The same thing was reflected in Canada as well. And sometimes the reports that we had seen in media was that they were working hands in gloves, and though the Khalistani terrorists and extremists will come in the front, but behind them, there were other forces supporting.
You're right. And in terms of reports, how many times have you reported the incidents that were not paid heed to. Did you also go to the Foreign Office talking about the complicity of Pakistani elements, that there is evidence to show that? Also, the wanted men that India has put forth, if you could just spell the details out on that front. Who are these people? What were they doing? What were their illegal activities? And what did the Canadian administration really do about that?
So did we inform the Canadian authorities? Yes, we did. And these were continuous processes through which my concerned colleagues would go there to their foreign office. There also was a weekly meeting in which we exchanged information, but at the same time, the Canadian Foreign Office had equally professional diplomats as we are. And they were very open to receiving our inputs. So we kept sending them inputs, not only through the meetings or going across to their ministry, but also through various other messaging applications as well as the emails. So the flow of information was never stopped or curtailed. They continued. And due to this flow of information, we were able to sensitize them better. On their part, we were always told that we have passed it on to the appropriate authorities in Canada. However, we did not see any decrease in the intimidating tactics used by the Khalistani terrorists and extremists based out of Canada. So I really do not know what used to happen once we had submitted to the Canadian Foreign Office our concerns on the safety and security of all our diplomats and officials.
So you are admitting that there was concern that was taken in by the Foreign Office, but when it comes to home and the political administration, very little was done on the ground.
Very little. In fact, I would say I had not identified an iota of action on the ground. Probably their system is such that it takes a long time. We had seen what had happened in the Kanishka bombing. The system took a long time before they came to any conclusion. And the conclusion was not what we would have liked to see as the justice. So probably it's a systemic issue. But as far as we are concerned, we did not see any result coming out from the ground which will lessen the threat on us.
Is it systemic or is it political? We have seen in the past also when certain governments tend to align with certain organizations or political parties that align with the Khalistani movement. Is it political? Is it more political than just systemic, than just following rules and laws?
See, in our own assessment, many of the encouragements that the Khalistani extremists and terrorists got was through inaction by the authorities. But it was also political. It was for domestic political reasons that they were being encouraged by the government of Prime Minister Trudeau. So everything, the entire ingredient to create an uncomfortable environment for us was there. And anyone who could have contributed to creating such an uncomfortable environment was contributing to that.
What's your reading of the handling of the entire situation, even if, and I'll come to that in the investigations, that the first leads were given by Five Eye, especially the United States of America. There's an entire interlinking of Niger with Gurpatwan Singh Panun case in the latest charges that have been filed in the United States of America. Having said that, just coming back to Trudeau, Prime Minister Trudeau, and the statements that he made, do you think it was outside the realm of diplomacy not to have just chosen the diplomatic channel to handle the situation rather than go public? Has he made it his private mission, his personal mission, to take on India and the Indian High Commission?
See, I'll not be able to comment on things which we have not spoken, but let me just take you through. Firstly, again, I'll not be able to comment on what happens between India and the United States. My only mandate was the bilateral relation between India and Canada. So I can only talk of that. And when we go there, then there was a crime committed. That crime was being investigated. And till the time the investigation doesn't reach its conclusion, in law-abiding countries, the course of the investigation, or where the investigation was looking at, should not have been released, leaked, or revealed. But this is what we saw, that Prime Minister Trudeau got up in the parliament, alleged India as he did. All of us know how did he do that. But then later on in one of the depositions, he said that he didn't have any hard evidence. So which means he was doing so without any hard evidence. And he knew that after doing that, the bilateral relation will head south. And it did, it spiraled down, which was not good for either Canada or for India, or for other partner countries who were looking at India-Canada relationship and wanting it to grow. So in a way, his statement on the floor of the parliament did damage the relationship. And now the difficulty is that he has created such a narrative there that many people who are not knowledgeable about the Khalistani extremists and terrorists and how do they challenge India's territorial integrity and sovereignty would just buy his story, and in their mind, India is what he described as that agents of the government of India were behind the killing.
But again, I come back to this because you have been reading domestic politics of Canada as well. He has a staunch Khalistani supporter as a political ally or a supporter, and he needs these numbers. He is in a weak position. Is this a desperate Trudeau trying to win elections rather than ensuring that he's on the right side of not just law but also history?
I will not try to guess the state of his mind, but what I have seen is that he has a number of friends who are known India baiters, who are anti-India elements, and who are pro-Khalistan elements as well. A few of them are also what I would call as kind of Khalistani extremists. So he had such a circle, and we know when he visited India for the bilateral visit 2018, what happened. So yes, there are people around him who have sympathy towards Khalistan, though the foreign ministry and some of the leaders in Canada do often speak of respecting the territorial integrity of India. We have not seen the same on the ground. On the ground, in fact, those who challenge India's territorial integrity and sovereignty gets emboldened and encouraged due to inaction.
Okay. Again, in terms of the investigations, High Commissioner Verma, the RCMP has come out and they have now said that there is evidence against certain agents. What do you make of that? The fact that there is evidence that they are saying it, and the reason why the opposition leaders have changed their tone and tenor from supporting you and the High Commission in India to maybe moving a little against.
There are channels of communication open. There are ways in which these things should be presented. There are MLAT procedures which could be used. There are formal channels which could be used, provided there are evidences which could be legally accepted. They are a rule of law country. We are a rule of law country. So you cannot just push some leads or intelligence to us and ask us to take the legal action on the basis of that. So evidence has to be hard, evidence has to be sustainable, and evidence has to be legally acceptable. They have a court of law, so have we. So in case if they think that they will be able to just hand over a piece of paper which does not have any hard or justifiable evidence, and we should go to the market just looking for what they want us to do. Gone are the days. This is a new India. This is an India which is a country of rule of law. So they have to satisfy my own judicial requirements, my own legal requirements, before we will be able to help and assist them.
Okay. In terms of the impact of the statements and the kind of position that Canada has taken, how do you see it impacting the India-Canada ties? Not just when it comes to trade or engagement, the pension funds, but also students, the visas. Do you see a real impact on the ground that things are turning against India when it comes to India-Canada ties?
Ideally, as a former Indian High Commissioner to Canada, at that time, Indian High Commissioner to Canada, I would hate to see any problem on the way coming to complicate the living of the people, the travel of the people. So people-to-people relationship should not be curtailed or should not be impacted. But the problem is that all of us are human beings. And if such a sentiment is spread falsely by leader of the country, then people would feel feared. People would feel emotional. And that will take a toll on the interactions between the two communities. So people-to-people relationship, I hope, continues normally, but there will be concerns, and the reason for those concerns would be the way in which the entire matter has been handled from Ottawa. On the visa issue, there would be delays because of the number of my officials being withdrawn now or declared PNG. So there will be delays in the regular visa processing, but I hope that there would be no delays in e-visa processing, which is an unilateral offer of India to Canada. Canada doesn't offer us any e-visa facility. So I would hope that it doesn't get impacted too much, but due to emotional reasons, there will be some impact.
Okay. Again, there is a lot of conversation that happened between India and Canada, but Canada again alleges High Commissioner Verma that India has not cooperated. I ask you this because Prime Minister Trudeau said two very important things in the committee that he presented himself. One is that India was not cooperating, and second, I'll talk about the Chinese interference. But the fact that he alleged that India did not cooperate. Would you agree or disagree? And what is the position that India taken? Because India very clearly said, you first give us evidence and we'll work on that. And Canada wanted it the other way around, if I understand it correctly?
See, if we go by the same narrative, we haven't seen Canada cooperating with us on extradition requests, which had been lodged as long back as 10 years. So cooperation would require hard evidences to be put on the table, which we have put on the table to the Canadian authorities, wherein we have given the full dossiers for those 26 extraditions requests and many other arrest requests. So when people have these double standard, that when you submit a dossier with all the evidence through the due process, I will not act on that. And when I want you to act on something which is fictitious, figment of imagination, and not hard evidence, you must come running to me and act on them. That's really unfair, and they should think about it, introspect, and give the sovereign equality and the respect that today's India needs.
The other very important thing, and you make a very important point, that they need to respect what India has been asking for. India decided on cooperating, and it was Canada's turn to really come back with the hard evidence. Having said that, interestingly, the Foreign Interference Committee was not just about India, it had a lot to do with China. Prime Minister Trudeau is indeed facing a lot of flack for not having taken action against China. What is this dichotomy where he doesn't take action against China, but on one incident goes all guns blazing against India?
See, I'll not get into the domestic affairs of Canada. That's not my domain or mandate. But as far as India's reference in the Foreign Interference Commission is concerned, let's try to look what is happening. So you have an accuser who happens to be the consul, so-called consul, for a banned organization representing the Khalistani terrorists and extremists. Then you have a few witnesses who are further amplifying it. And then you have court officials or commission officials in this case taking down notes. Where is the principle of natural justice? Where is the principle of natural justice for people who are being accused, and in this case, country being accused, to put out their point of view? Is this really a judicial process? I will have my doubts. As far as the other country you mentioned is concerned, I'll let them speak for it. But as far as India is concerned, all the references which have been made regarding India in this Foreign Interference Commission needs to be scrutinized. Most of those allegations come from documents which clearly say that this information has been obtained through single source, which means a person on the street says that India is bad, and that is taken as an evidence enough to talk about it in a quasi-judicial or judicial commission. That is not rule of law. That is not how we define rule of law. In rule of law countries, principle of natural justice is most important principle to adhere to.
Again, going back to the youth that now are going to India, going to Canada, Indian youth who are going to study over there. We're also getting reports, High Commissioner Verma, and that must have been one of the biggest challenges for you. Having students now, because they have a changed rule and work permit, and in order to stay on in Canada, they just go and join a Khalistani movement, sit in some protest, get a photograph, and then seek asylum. Is that a modus operandi that you're seeing increase and a big challenge for India when it comes to Indian youth in Canada being mobilized by Khalistanis?
I would say that this modality I have seen in a few cases wherein these students were able to apply for asylum without any real reason, with sometimes fake documentations, or most of the time fake documentation, in fact, and they were considered for asylum by the system. I hope they revamp the system. They try to detect who is a real asylum seeker and who is not. India is a democracy, the largest democracy in the world. There is no reason for any person from India to go to another country to seek asylum. We are a blessed country. We are a country where we find our own ways to happiness.
There are wanted men, wanted terrorists in Canada. If you could spell out the recent names that were sent to Canada, and what did Canada really do about them?
I'll not be able to tell you all the names, but one of the principal names which is important for all of us to know is Goldie Brar. And he was put up in the most wanted list there once. And these lists, mind you, are not the government lists. These lists are prepared by an organization known as BOLO, and who work with the law enforcement agencies all over Canada, Pan-Canada, and prepare this list according to the inputs that they receive. Now, of course, he's no more on the wanted list. I don't know what has happened. I have no explanation to give to your viewers on that. But the difficulty there is that a crime which was committed in India, only on those cases we will give them the extradition requests. And for those crimes, we would expect them to come on the table, discuss those things which are not clear. In most of the cases, the evidences are absolutely clear and transparent, on which they should act upon urgently in order to repair the reputation, which basically says that they don't act on our requests.
My final question to you, High Commissioner Verma, it has been an arduous task, an uphill task to really convince Canada on, or at least engage Canada on the investigations that are underway and India's position on what India has done or not done. We've seen a few meetings between the prime ministers, and elections in Canada is a year away, if at all they take place. In such a scenario, do you think the leadership can actually come together to really resolve this diplomatic standoff between the two countries? Or are we at a stage where it's a point of no return?
As an optimist diplomat, I will never say no. But at the same time, we have a core concern emanating from Canada. This core concern challenges our sovereignty and territorial integrity. So therefore, unless our core concerns are taken into consideration by the authorities in Canada, we don't think we'll have a normal relation with the country.
Okay, just another question, because this one is important. We've seen a lot of incidents of vandalization, whether it's our temples, whether it's any other place of faith, our consulates. Do you think the increase in these incidents and a lot of anti-Modi hate messages everywhere, do you think the increase in such incidents that that for Canada fall into the realm of free speech is something that is increasing because the administration is not taking action? Now there's criminality and there's freedom of speech. Where do you think that thin line just gets that the elements are allowed to cross to cross?
See, I'm not an expert on Canadian law, but whatever my understanding is that freedom of expression is not absolute. Freedom of expression can be limited by the Canadian Constitution and related laws on account of incitement to violence, on account of hate speech. And when I look at all these instances which you mentioned, they do fall in one or both of these categories. So if they do fall, I would expect the Canadian authorities to look into such cases more carefully. And if indeed they violate the Canadian law, take legal action against them. It is not only against our religious places of worship, which includes all kinds of places of worship. India is a multicultural, multi-religious country. But it also means they are threatening the Indo-Canadians, saying, go back to India. They are Canadian citizens. What are you talking about? Those Indian nationals are also being threatened to go back to India. Is that not intimidation? Is that not criminal, even according to the Canadian law? That needs to be decided by the experts of the Canadian law. As I said earlier, I am not. But as a layman, I feel that the Canadian law should work against them and should tell them about the restrictions. Canada is a beautiful country with wonderful people, very friendly, very welcoming. But these handful guys, unfortunately, having their origins in India, are spoiling the beauty and welcome of Canada.
There's a lot of messaging on social media, and one such thing on a lighter but a very serious note is that Canada has become the new Pakistan when it comes to diplomatic ties. Would you agree, High Commissioner Verma, that diplomatic ties between India and Canada is so low at a time when we're doing Kartarpur Sahib agreement with Pakistan, that Canada indeed has become the new Pakistan?
Again, I'm not an expert on India-Pakistan relation. My only domain was India-Canada bilateral relations. So I'll not be able to give you a definitive response, but all of us know how Pakistan had been trying to harm India's national interests, not only today, but for decades altogether. I hope that such activities emanating from our neighborhood does not impact our relationship with a country so far away as Canada.
On that note, High Commissioner Verma, thank you so much for speaking with the India Today Network. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Namaskar.